Welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, August 3rd, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a 2020 electoral map and discussing the difference between swing states and bellwether states. So I'm actually going to classify the states that I consider to be bellwethers and then other states that I would classify as swing or battleground states. So we're going to go ahead and characterize all of the safe Republican states just because I don't feel that it's necessary to talk too in depth about the electoral politics of Tennessee. And also the same thing goes for the Democratic Party. Unless there's a competitive race in one of these states, there's no real need to jump in and completely analyze Maryland politics or Vermont politics. But looking at this electoral map, the GOP starts off with a disadvantage against the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party for the past couple of years has had a pretty strong hold on the same amount of electoral votes that they usually carry into an election, the 183 electoral votes that hasn't wavered in years and hasn't really been competitive in years. Since 2008, I think all of these states have been considered safe. I know they narrowed down in 2016, but I think the only time that any of these states that I classified as safe blue were competitive was in 2000, 2004 on the West Coast. But other than that, these states have pretty much stayed the same. Same thing goes for the Republican Party. They did have a period in time where Indiana went blue, Missouri and Montana and North and South Dakota were competitive, but then again, Obama was a very particular candidate who was able to win over a lot of people. Keep in mind, if you look at the 2008 election results, North Dakota and South Dakota were, I believe, 9-point margins for John McCain, or at least single-digit margins, and he actually came within a likely margin of a lot of these states. And states such as Mississippi and Montana was decided by just a couple thousand votes, Missouri as well. But speaking about other states, Missouri, we're talking about states that, when I say swing states, I mean states that overall will move the election in one way or another. I really should have added an additional battleground states thing. I know those are used interchangeably. I know they typically get referred to as one another, but swing states are states that I would consider to be determinative of who wins the election. And I know that's very broad, but for example, let's take Texas. Texas is a state that Donald Trump needs to win if he wins the election. But it's also a state that Biden doesn't need to win in order to win the election. Biden has a number of pathways to 270 that Donald Trump does not. Donald Trump has to win Texas in order to win the election. Biden doesn't. Same thing goes for a state such as Florida or Ohio. These states, sure, could move with their general region, such as the Rust Belt or the entire Sun Belt itself, but they're not crucial for the Biden campaign, but they are crucial for the Trump campaign. So I'm going to classify some of these states as it really all depends actually what candidate you're looking at for their map. I'm going to go ahead and just classify states such as Ohio and Texas as swing states, and then we'll talk about what I classify as a bellwether state. Pretty much, we're talking about a Democrat +9 lead, I believe, or 8 lead on the 538 average. This is the type of electoral environment that we're working with. We're working with the Democratic Party having an 8-point lead over the Republicans in both the generic ballot and on the presidential level. So it's 2020. We have Senate elections up. We have House elections up. The Democratic Party has a number of opportunities for pickups in the Senate, probably will retain the House without a doubt. And then the presidential election, obviously, is their main target, the White House getting out Donald Trump. They have a lot of energy on their side. And a lot of states that previously were Republican states are close now. So if the Democratic Party enters into the next election, 2024, with the same type of energy, we likely will see the same exact swing states. But assuming that the election was actually narrow, assuming that it was a Clinton and Trump scenario up through Election Day, and that all of a sudden it narrowed up within the final 2 weeks, Texas will turn red, a number of other states will become red, just because of the fact that they are only swing states, given that the national environment is Democrat +8. So considering that the Democrats are up 8% nationwide, that's what's making a lot of these previous Republican states swing states. It's not so much that these states individually will be swing states in the future. I think Texas definitely will, but there's a reason why, Cook Political Report, or at least just a number of other pundits have rated states such as Missouri and Indiana and Montana and Alaska, moved them down into the likely Republican column. If this was in another election year, and let's say the election was within 1-2% nationwide, those states would be solid red. So we're going to characterize all of the swing states that I think are crucial for both candidates to win in order to win the election. I honestly don't characterize Colorado, Nevada, Virginia, New Mexico, New Hampshire as swing states. I understand that the Trump campaign will definitely be making a play for all 5 of those states. Right now, it doesn't look like they're in reach for the Trump campaign. He hasn't really expanded too much in terms of Latino voters. Biden sure has dropped from Hillary Clinton's numbers, but then again, you also have to account for the fact that when they're polling these people, they have the option of saying they're not voting or are undecided. When you cast your ballot, you're not undecided, and you're obviously not voting. So the numbers do look a little bit different, but overall, Biden still leads amongst Hispanic voters, and the marginal increase for Donald Trump does not all of a sudden make up for the loss of suburban white voters and college-educated voters that were still voting for the Democratic Party, but nothing similar to the margin that we see today. And the non-college-educated white voters are voting for Trump in a much smaller margin than what we saw back in 2016. And senior citizens nationwide flipped from a 15-point lead for Trump down to a 5-point lead for Biden. Not down to, up to a 5-point lead for Joe Biden. So the Democrats already start off with 220. Minnesota, normally, I guess you could say, is a Democratic state. I'm going to characterize it as a Democratic state. I understand it was close 4 years ago. I just honestly don't see it going to Donald Trump with any stretch of the imagination at this point. Unless, again, something changes. There's obviously going to be an October surprise. I know the GOP, or at least I hope for their sake, that they have something up their sleeve right before the election that they can drop on Joe Biden in order to make this race competitive. But right now, as it stands, Biden's hovering, meaning he could increase after his VP announcement at around 8% nationwide. So I wouldn't consider Maine a swing state either. I still am going to characterize Actually, I'll characterize Maine's 2nd district as a swing state, or swing district, and Nebraska's 2nd district, because if the election does come down to the wire, these states absolutely could make a difference. And for Donald Trump, every electoral vote counts. For Joe Biden, he has a lot more pathways to 270. So Iowa and Ohio are states that I think are swing states. Give us a general idea of who's going to win the election based off that, along with Georgia. But states that I consider to be bellwether states are states that I expect to pretty much mimic the national margin. And I know this is, I'm actually going to possibly classify some of these Democratic states, but bellwether essentially just means that these states match up with the national margin. Missouri was actually a bellwether state for a very long period of time, pretty much voted with the election winner most of the time in that sense. And the margins were off a couple of times, but in Missouri, it was always looked to as a bellwether state. It went for Bill Clinton. It went for George Bush. It went for Republicans, went for Democrats. And then in 2008, Missouri voted for John McCain despite a very drastic shift leftward in this country. Missouri voted for John McCain by less than a percentage point, despite Obama winning in Indiana, winning in North Carolina, winning in Virginia, winning in Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Ohio, Iowa, all states that George Bush had carried in the previous election, Florida, that Obama was able to carry in 2008. And that's pretty much what ended Missouri being viewed as a bellwether state. Despite Mitt Romney carrying it by a pretty substantial margin, at least compared to John McCain in 2012, the mainstream media did not characterize Missouri for a very long portion of the evening. The West Coast was called before Missouri because it was looked to as a possibility. There's a possibility that it could move back into being a bellwether state. Ended up voting for the GOP in 2012, ended up voting for the GOP in 2016, and will likely vote for the the Republican Party in 2020. So what do I classify as bellwether states on our electoral map? I would consider the Rust Belt to be bellwether states. These 3 states have pretty much mimicked what we've seen on the national average within their polling data and within what they've voted based off their 2018 election results, their governor election results, or Senate election results, some of the House seats that have flipped in these states. The Democratic Party is entering in with a very large advantage over over Donald Trump in November. They are going to have an 8-point lead over him if the numbers stand today, and Joe Biden will likely carry these states by roughly a 7 to 8 point margin. And I think these states will be voting in the same direction as the Electoral College winner, and I think that the margins will be roughly the same. They weren't so much bellwether states in 2016 because the Democratic Party usually wins the popular vote. They have for 4 out of the 5 elections since 2000. So Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I would consider to be bellwether states. Now, for the remaining 2 states on your screen, North Carolina and Florida, I'm going to go ahead and consider both of these as swing states. Now, these 3 bellwether states are states that I definitely could see going to Joe Biden by the same margin as the national popular vote. I really don't see Biden winning in North Carolina or, Florida or Arizona, Texas, Ohio, Iowa, Georgia, any of these states. by the same margin that he would run up the numbers nationwide. Now, this is assuming that Biden is going to win the election, because if we were talking about bellwether states, if Trump was ahead, I probably would have characterized Florida and, probably just Florida nationwide. But then again, Trump probably won't win the popular vote, even if he does win the election. A lot of things would have to go right for President Trump, and it looks like everything is going wrong. But as we move through the election, I think the rest of these states should be considered to be swing states, and then the bellwether states are the 3 states in the Rust Belt. I was considering classifying some of these states over in this region of the United States, but if I'm giving it to Joe Biden regardless, there's no leeway for Donald Trump to be a winner in any of these states, so I'm not going to classify them as bellwethers, assuming that, or in the case that Donald Trump does somehow reverse this lead that Joe Biden has, convention bump, whatever it might be, and become very competitive nationwide. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter, and also the Discord link in the bottom left of your screen. Just pop it into your browser. It'll bring you to the Discord. And then there's a video that you can go ahead and watch, and then a playlist for my 2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.